I mean, there's a whole background in my family. You know, I had a grandmother that did tarot and stuff like that, and uh, I was an altar boy, in the Episcopal and the Catholic Church, and did things like, for instance, we used to have canaries, and we had a few of them that died over time, right? You know, over some number of years. My mom especially liked the singing canaries kind of thing. And when a few of them, the two that I remember that died while I was sort of close to the church and the altar boy stuff, and it was very different than an altar boy. Like we actually were poured, the wine, and there was with the bread. It was all kind of very real, not so abstract. And in my family, there was a lot of this. We call it Aboriginal sort of touches in Christianity, what they call the brujeria and stuff. You know, this magical mystery tour part of it. Uh, for instance, one day we were coming home, and my mother said, "Stop! Don't go up the steps." There was a string there, and there was a little white powder, and so she cleaned it off and said we could pass now. That had to do with someone trying to do some sort of bad spell on our family, kind of thing. So that was always the background. And then I grew up in a Jewish Orthodox community, which is very religious, and there were a lot of important Jewish holidays that had a lot of kind of mystical, roots to it. So all of that was my background. I even held a couple of funerals with a couple of the canaries. And held, my friends would line up, and I would get a cheese box and put the canary in it with a little cotton, and take it over to the churchyard, and we'd bury the canary there. So again, that whole background was there, right? And so in class, whether it was in kindergarten or so on, when I was I loved working with the finger paints and mushing all of that around and creating these clouds, which I would find things in it. Like when you look up in the sky and you say, "Oh, there's a horse, and there's something else, and something. There's a later on a Volkswagen," you would say, or something like that, a castle, kind of thing. So always that kind of imagining. So there I would be pushing all of these paints around, and I would create these sort of find these images in it. Right? So I'd bring it home, and I would tell a story to my parents, and I would say, and that's mom, and that's dad, and they would always wonder, but it doesn't look like us, and I would say, oh, it's not, it's the spirit, it's the ghost. So I was always, in a sense, had a kind of imaginative relationship to all of those aspects of the sort of dream world, and the idea of the living and the dead and kind of things. So that's the beginning of it. And then later on, when I was about 9 years old, a bunch of us would go to the corner. There was a big empty lot. Well, it wasn't empty. It was full of old furniture, old pianos and so on, and there was an empty building right next to it. And so I imagined a lot of the people, when they left, they threw all of that stuff onto the empty lot became a full lot of all of these things. We'd climb over the fences, jump up and down on the couches, tear them apart, throw rocks at the windows, see how many windows we could break, with the idea that every window you broke, you released an angel, right? So there's always this kind of mystical background for me, just in my day-to-day kind of life. And what were the scary games? The ghosts were coming at night. The middle of the night, you just make these kind of sounds, and of course, I always scared my sister. Kind of thing. So that's the whole background. So as I became more and more involved in the idea of being an artist, because I had an uncle who was an artist, and Uncle Julio used to visit from his journeys, doing windows, bodega windows, painting murals from in all of the Puerto Rican communities. He would be out there. And then he would come back and visit us and bring a lot of his work, drawings and so on, and bodega windows that he had done, kind of thing. So I was really curious about one thing about his involvement as an artist. He could have grown-ups sit still. I mean, imagine to have that kind of power. Here I was, this kid that everyone yelled at, Raphael, siéntate, stop running around, be quiet, kind of thing. All he had to do was sit down with the pad, put the little charcoal up, and all these adults would be quiet, not a sound, kind of thing. And he would always, complain if they moved, and they would stop moving, kind of thing. So I said, I want to learn to do that. And then I realized that to learn to do that was to ask him to teach me how to draw. And so I would ask him, I would say, teach me how to draw, right? And he'd give me a bunch of paper and a couple of pieces of charcoal, and he would say, draw. Just keep drawing. Next time I visit, I'll give you a critique. He didn't use that word, but, I'll look at the work, I'll tell you what's good and what's bad and so on. So he did that for a couple of years. And over those couple of years, I became really good at keeping, having adults sit still. And I felt very powerful. And I said, this is for me. I want to be an artist so I can always tell adults to sit still. We're just kind of a small world to create for myself. To just, here I am an artist. And then later on, I realized that being an artist was more complicated than that. And I stayed with it. But at that point, I had read The Master Builder. I had read a few of the books about architects and so on. And I wanted to be an architect. I wanted to design cities and houses and so on, especially. I missed the idea of the fact that my parents had separated and so on, and we never really, something happened to the house. So the idea of, designing a house and building a house. And then as I took some art courses in architecture, right? But prior to that, I had graduated from high school, and my parents were sending my sister to college. And I complained. I said, why can't I go to college? And they said, you guys, basically my father and my mother, I think they were both feminists because, my dad said, well, no, the women have a more difficult time, Raphael. We have to protect them more, kind of thing. And then I recalled as I was growing up, they were always telling me to protect my sister. Okay, so now I'm the protector, and so she can now go to college, and what do I do? And so my father says to me, well, he says, remember that big war that I was in? He was in the Second World War. He was part of the invasion, right? Got a Bronze Star and the whole thing. For him, it was interesting because he enlisted in the army. Here he is, married with 2 kids, right? And he's enlisting in the army. He wants to get into that, be part of that invasion. And when he was enlisting, they were saying, "What are you doing? You're married. You have 2 kids. Come on, we got a lot of young people that are." He said, "No, I have to go and kill Nazis." He said, "I have to go and kill Nazis." So I said, "Okay." I had to go kill Nazis. He says, "Remember that, Raphael?" I said, "Yeah, we used to really worry about you and so on." And even a few times, like that song, Roger Young fought and died for the many fought among. We used to cry at the radio when they used to play because, our father was in Europe with the invasion, and maybe the Nazis might kill him, so as well as he killing Nazis. So he said to me, "Raphael, there's a Korean War. Enlist. Do like I did. I came home. I survived. I came home, and I did some GI Bill stuff at the college and at the local high school. He got a certificate and so on, which helped him with his coming back and being, picking up where he was employed, and got a promotion and so on from attending college for, a course in the night school and so on, kind of thing." He said, "You can do that." So I said, "Yeah, all I have to do is live." So I said, "Then I can go to college." He said, "Yeah." He said, "Just, go there, kill the commies, come home, go to college. Simple." Right? So fortunately, I had taken enough math in high school, and enough photography and some topology and topography, and so on, kind of thing. So I ended up with doing some photo interpreting and all of this stuff that I can't talk to you about. So anyway, there I was at Pratt studying architecture, and I took a few art courses. And within that, a lot of this mystery kind of approach to the work that I did in the art class within architecture, even looking at these ancient architectures and so on kind of thing, and the idea of the cave paintings and all of that kind of thing. And so the art professor said to me, Raphael, you should be an artist, right? So I started thinking, gee, here's someone who's, said you should be an artist, instead of saying, no, that doesn't look like me. That doesn't look like me. No, my hands are too big. My feet are too small. My nose is too big. My eyes, that whole thing. So I said, art. I like it. I like all the compliments I got from grown-ups. All right. And then I went on and switched from architecture to art education, because I figured art education, I could do art, I could teach, it could be something I enjoy doing. And within that process, I was engaging more and more of the mystical in art, the idea of the Aboriginal culture, trying to get away from the Eurocentricness of the whole idea of aesthetics and the whole idea of what is the successful artwork. And I was looking more and more into the Aboriginal work, into primitive art kind of thing. And within it came all of the mystery, all of the magic, all of the protection of the soul. All of these images, all of these sculptures, they served a purpose of protection, of, again, a relationship with spirit. And so then out of that, the whole idea of the reconciling in spirit, in the protection, there was always a sacrifice, right? The whole redemptive sacrifice. And so then I decided that's what's missing from art, right? Within the Eurocentric, that to depart from the Eurocentric, I would engage in more spiritual protection of the soul as the basis of the work. And within that, then, the whole idea of the reconciling involves some sort of sacrificial destruction of objects. And then I decided, wait a second. This whole idea, even from the Western perspective, to harvest something. You plant something, and then you harvest it, and then you make food, and then you chew it all up, and you digest it, and so on. That whole process is sort of central to all idea of things being made and being created. But within creation, there are things being destroyed and being disassembled and so on, kind of thing. So then I did a lot of research into all of the areas of reconciliation within sacrifice. Biblical research, all of the ancient cultures and so on, the Bhagavad Gitas and all of these ideas of giving things up to the larger spirit as a way of, in a sense, distracting it from its working on you, making you ill and sort of making you grow old and weak and so on. So that's all of my artwork then was the releasing of spirit from objects, the idea that our spirit, wherever we went, was in a sense with us, like a smoke sort of surrounding us that we'd carry along with us. And when we sat, some of it would be absorbed where we were, and in situations that we're in, it was being absorbed in that situation. And so the idea of deconstructing the situations, destructing the furniture, and all of that then became part of central to my aesthetic. And then it was couches, and then it was everything. I disassembled and released it. It's freed the bioplasma that, was our spirit, that it was absorbed in it, sort of release it from these objects. So that became, in a sense, central to my work, to release that spirit of ourselves that got lost somehow, or connected, or enamored with matter. Right? To release that spirit back into its ephemeral sort of state.